Hi, and welcome to the video. Bit of a long one today. We're going to be moving a website from the Fasthosts shared platform and adding it onto a server that it has Plesk installed on it. So I will timestamp the video. I'm going to basically go through the process of downloading the website from Fasthosts, things you need to check, how to upload it, and I will also cover getting yourself an SSL certificate too. So yeah, it might be quite a long one, but I will timestamp it on YouTube. So if you certain bit you need to check, you can just check in the comment section. So the first thing I need to do in this process would be to get a server. However, I already have one. I'm not going to go into too much detail about servers in this one. Basically, the process of moving the website should be the same regardless of whether you're on Windows or Linux, and it shouldn't really matter what version of Linux you're using either. My server's an Ubuntu one on this one, but again, because Plesk is a sort of a graphical interface, the actual operating system won't change this process too much. If you're not sure what server you need, I would recommend giving our sales team a call, just because they'll be able to help you with that choice. I'm using a CloudNX cloud server, but again, the process will be pretty similar. I'm also moving a WordPress website, as that's generally speaking the most common use case we see here. But again, the process is going to be very similar. I'm moving web files and database files from the shared platform over to the server. So with that in mind, let's get started. So the first thing I need to do is get my website files. And again, I'm not going to go through the process of where to find all your connection details, just because it will extend the video out further than it needs to. But I'm going to be downloading the website files for my fictitious website, fictitiousconsulting.co.uk, which is just this here, and it's just on our shared platform. So this is my website. So to connect to FTP, I'm going to go ahead and use FileZilla for this, and I have my connection details ready to hand. So let's just go ahead and add those in, and we'll grab that. Now this process is the actual downloading your website files is going to take a certain amount of time depending on how big your website is. For me, I'm literally just using a default WordPress install just to try and keep the load down. But if you've got a massive website, you can do this, download it all via FTP, or you can actually SSH in and compress it all and download it that way, which will be quicker if you've got a big website. Not going to cover this in this one. If you don't know how to do that, I would just speak to support. But generally speaking, downloading it by FTP will be fine. Like I say, big website might take a little bit of time. So here I've got my file. This is a destination on my local laptop that I'm working on here, and these are the files on the shared platform. So all I'm going to do, and I'm in htdocs here. So if we go on upper directory, we'll see I'm in htdocs, and I just want to copy everything from here. And I'm going to put it straight into this file over here, but you might have a WordPress folder or something like that, but I'm just going to put it straight over here. Now, if you haven't used FileZilla before, you find, like I say, this process might take a while. You'll see this queue is basically going to be getting, it's not really going to be moving much because it's finding more files as it transfers them. If it gets interrupted or anything like that, or times out or anything like that, you can just resume the transfer from down here if you need to come back to it. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because it's probably going to take about 15 minutes or so, I would think. Okay, and we're back. So now I have downloaded all the web files from the shared server and got them on my local laptop here. So the next thing we need to do is get our database files. So if we go to our admin page here, and we're going to go to databases. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. We have got guides that I will link to in the video description because it's going to depend on your package and those sorts of things. So we've got the database here, this fictitious DB. So we're going to click on that, and we're just going to log in via PHPMyAdmin here, just because it's the easiest way of getting a database export. Obviously, if you already know how to do this, you can just skip on a little bit. And I'm just going to make sure I'm using the right server address. Yeah, that's fine. So, and it's fictitious user. So again, we're using the details here. So I'm using this fictitious user here. Password. Hopefully that should log us in. Right, so we're logged in. So now we just need to make sure that that fictitious DB is highlighted, and we're going to go to export. And the good thing here is we can just use the quick method. So I'm just going to use that export method of quick, and I'm going to just download it like that. And that's going to download an SQL dump onto my desktop. Now, we're not deleting any data at the moment, so if something's gone wrong with that or anything like that, don't panic. You can always come back to this if something doesn't quite work. But for now, that should work fine. So now we have got our website files, we've got our database, and we've got our website files. So now what we need to do is go over to our server and start setting up Plesk so we can move everything over to there. So like I said, I've got a Cloud NX panel here, Cloud NX server. I'm going to go into the Cloud NX area. So here's my server that I'm going to be moving over to here. And like I say, if you're not sure what server you need, please do speak to our sales team, as I could make a whole video on them. So I don't want to extend this one out too much. So we need to log into Plesk at this point. Now to log into Plesk, if we look at these server access details, we can scroll down and we can see the Plesk admin area, the username, and the initial password there. So I'm just going to pause it quickly and grab that password. And just grab that password. So when you click show password, it just shows it on the screen. And like I say, not that it really matters because this server is just a test one. It's not the end of the world. So now we're just going to go to this URL here. But the first thing, before we start logging in, we're just going to check is the firewall policy. Now we can see here, I'm using a custom one called All Open. You probably don't want to use that. This is the hardware firewall that we've got for our Cloud NX servers. But again, if you're using any other kind of server, you're going to need to worry about firewall ports. And this is just the ports that traffic is allowed on your server. So I'm going to change this to my Plesk one. So on Cloud NX, we just go into network and firewall policies, and we can see here that we don't need to go through all of this, but I just wanted to show you the policy before I actually applied it to my server. So I've got this Linux plus Plesk one here, and I will list these ports in the video description, but realistically, these are the ports that you're going to, generally speaking, be needing just to use Plesk as a web server. So we've got FTP, SSH, web traffic there, SSL web traffic, and then you've got the Plesk ports. So there's not too many, but they should be sufficient for now. So I will list those in the video description. So I'm going to use this Linux plus Plesk firewall rule here on my server. Let's just go ahead and apply that now. And it should be pretty instant. So I'm just going to change that, because you might find as well on a fresh build, you've got, depending on the server, you might find that all your ports are closed by default, and then you just have to open which ones you need. But again, we've got guides on that. We've got support. So if you need any help with firewalls, please do just contact us. Not a problem. All right. Okay. So that's my Linux plus Plesk firewall rule that I just looked at. We'll just double check, and status is still on, so it doesn't need to update. So let's go ahead and connect. So you're going to get a connection is not private error here, just because the server hasn't got any SSL certificates on. This is a really fresh server for me. I've just rebuilt it for this video. So you will get an error here. Well, just to advise, you're not private, but obviously you know which is your server. You know it's your server. So it's not too much of a concern for you. So now we're going to use those login details we just saw a minute ago. Just grab my password. And we're going to go ahead and log in. And we're going to get this is going to be the first screen you see when you first log into Plesk Obsidian. Personally, I would recommend clicking on Explore Plesk. These are kind of designed for someone who's just using it for the first time, building a new website, but we don't really need to do that. So I'm going to go to Explore Plesk and just skip that onboarding. And then you're going to get the end user license agreement. So read through all of that, accept. And there might be a little thing here just saying you skipped the onboarding, which was just the bit that we just saw. You don't really need to do anything with it. So one thing before we move any further is Plesk has two views. You've got the default view, and the one that's used in pretty much all the guides and pretty much regarded as a default is what's called this provider view here. I don't think that's the right name for it. But yeah, but if we change view, we can go to power user view. Yeah, so we're in service provider now, which is the standard. If you go down here and click on power user view, it will just change the layout a little bit. So it's just worth noting at this point, if you've never used Plesk before, you might be looking at guides and thinking, I'm not seeing the same as what's on the screen, and that could be why. So let's go ahead and switch back. And the first thing we need to do now is set up a brand new domain. And like I say, this video is assuming you're not being a provider to anyone else. You just needed a server to have a bit more power for your website. So in that, just because it's just going to be you using this, we're going to go to domains, and we're going to go ahead and add the domain. And I'm moving across fictitiousconsulting.co.uk and check the spelling, because I spelled that wrong all the time. I should have picked an easier domain name. We don't need to assign this to a customer, and we don't really need to change any of this sort of stuff. The only thing that might be particularly useful is checking the system user credentials, which is your FTP access details. You can change it a bit later on if you want to. Now I am going to need to make a note of this because, well, I'm going to need it. So let's just copy that over to my little password list. Okay, so we're going to add domain now. And that doesn't normally take too long. It just goes through a few bits and pieces. And there we go. You're going to get a warning here. This is completely what we'd expect. It says the domain doesn't resolve to the IP address of your server. This is the IP address of my server. That's because my domain is still pointed at the Fasthosts platform, so my website's still nice and online, so I'm not losing any visitors or anything like that. While I build it and sort out the Plesk side of things, we want it to be going to the shared platform for now, so don't worry about that. That's exactly what we'd expect. So let's move on. Right, now we need to upload our files to Plesk now. So we can get our FTP access details. We're going to start with the website file, so the FTP, and then we'll do the database after. So the FTP access details are just in here, and we can just click on that one. If you need to change the password, you can just click into there, and you can set a new password. We already know what the password was because we got it just a moment ago. So let's go and connect. So we're going to open up FileZilla down here. Okay, so we are going to try and just quick connect here. So if we use our server details, so host is going to be your server IP address. You can see it in the URL there. Username is going to be what we just saw there. By default, it's just the domain name. And the password is the password. So let's go ahead and connect there. So you get a warning about the certificate, nothing to worry about. We know it's our server, so we're going to just go ahead and trust that one. Now, this is interesting because we're getting a fairly common error here, which is where we verified. We can see through our logs here, we've connected, we verified certificate, established, logged in, retrieving directory listing. Now, this is going to time out in a second. Now, that's okay. That's probably a firewall issue. It's going to keep reconnecting there. So the first thing to try here, if you run into this error, no problem. If we just go to Edit, Settings, and what we'll do is we can just change to active mode here. So if we just go on there, we still might have a problem. We still might not be able to connect using this, but this is the first thing to try. So we're going to set that. Now let's try, and we're going to abort the previous connection and try and connect now. Okay, same issue, so that's not a problem. What we're going to do, we're going to go back into passive mode on FTP. Passive. So what we're going to do is just go in and open some firewall rules on our firewall. So we need to do that in the cloud panel because we're currently using this Linux and Plesk firewall policy. And what we're going to need to do is open up the passive firewall rules. So I had a feeling this might happen, so I have got those set here. And again, I'll leave this in the comment section as well. But just for now, if we just go down and add that port range. Now, it is a big port range, so just make sure when you're done with FTP, come back and just remove that rule from the policy. So this is going to take a little while to configure. So what we'll see now is if we go up here, we can see that firewall policy is updating. So I'm going to go ahead and just pause there because this does normally take about 5 to 10 minutes before it will be active again. So just pause there. Okay, so that has finished updating now. It's gone back to being green. So with any luck, just open up that connection again, and it should. There we go. So we're in now. Okay, cool. So now what we need to do is upload the files from my local laptop onto my server. So the directory we need to go into is http docs here, and there's the default Plesk index page. I'm going to leave that in there for now, but obviously you can go ahead and delete it, but it's quite useful for testing to make sure DNS is propagated and stuff. So I'm going to leave that now. We'll come back to that later. So I've got all the files I copied over, and I'm just going to put them straight in there. Now, again, this transfer is going to take a little bit of time. It's much quicker as we've got our dedicated server now, but we've got 2,600 files to transfer. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there. Right, okay, all those files are transferred across over to my server. So now we need to do the database. So we're going to go back to Plesk and just go back to our domain. We can always go back to the sort of the main web space for this by going domains and then clicking on the domain in case you get a bit lost. So now we need to do a database. So from this main dashboard bit here, we can go to databases, and we're going to just add a database. So this is just creating a database that we can import our backup that we created earlier. So you can call the database name whatever you want. If you want to make your life a little bit easier, you can call it the same as whatever it was on the Fasthosts shared platform, but you don't need to. I'm just going to call it server DB just so it's differentiated, so you can see where it's different. And you can have it on the related site. You don't need to do that if you don't want to. I just set that there. So database username, I'm going to just have server user. And I am going to use the same password as I had for my other user, just because it's a little easier. Okay. So again, you can use this, the username and password can be different to whatever you were using before. So don't worry too much if you can't remember what they were or if they're a bit confusing. So you can allow remote connections from any host, or you can allow local connections only. You could probably, for a WordPress site, you could just allow local connections only, just because the database and the website are both on your server, so they just need to communicate with each other. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to allow remote connections from any host, because that could mean, say for example, I'm going to show you how to do the upload through PHPMyAdmin, which is fine because it's all on this server. But if you've got a big database upload that you need to put up, you probably need to connect using a client, and in which case you would need to allow it from any host. Otherwise, it's going to reject your connection from your home or your work or wherever you're connecting from. So I'm just going to leave it from any host there. Okay, so this should be right. That's been created. Perfect. So now we've got our host there, so local host. But again, if you were connecting externally, you'd want to use your server IP address. So now what we need to do is go ahead and import the file we had earlier. I can just go through here. I can just click import dump because I've got a .sql file as I showed you earlier. But if you've got something else you need to upload, you can always go through PHPMyAdmin. But I'm just going to do the easy option because that's what we like, and I'm just going to choose the file to upload, and that is going to be on my local machine. And that was just in my downloads. It was that .sql file there. So let's go ahead and open that. And we're going to recreate the database. So upload. And the database server DB was created. So fingers crossed, we should be good to go. So now we've uploaded our website onto Plesk. What we now need to do is look at the DNS, because at the moment, if someone goes to fictitiousconsultant.co.uk, they're going to go to my nice working website on Fasthosts on the shared platform. So let me just quickly check. So Yep, here we go. So what we need to do now, before we change the DNS, is another step, which is what I was just checking, which is going to be to change our, this is only for WordPress users, by the way. So what I'm going to do is change my WP config. I will show you how to do it. Again, common use case, but you can skip this bit if you're not using WordPress. So in the files on our server, remember that's the connection I've got here. I'm going to need to just go ahead and change the WP config file, which is this one here, and I need to just update it with the new database connection settings. So before we change DNS, because otherwise when we change the DNS, you'd get an error because the database wouldn't be able to connect. So let's go in here. And we've got our connection details here. So the database user is going to be the one I just set up, which was server user. And the database password, I didn't change that. And the database name is serverdb. Okay, and the other thing we need to just change here is this IP address, because that's the old shared database server. We can just use localhost because it's on the same server as the website. So if we just go ahead and save that, close it, and I want to just upload this file back to the server. Thank you, FileZilla. And I'm going to delete the local file. So now, in theory, we should be good to go. There's one little caveat before we change DNS, and that is the small matter of SSL. If your website is currently protected by an SSL certificate, if we go back to Fictitious Consulting here, we can see here at the moment the domain is not secured. Now, we can't easily set this up until we change the DNS. So if we change DNS now, there's going to be a brief period where before you can sort your SSL certificate out, that your website is going to show as insecure to users because it's not going to have its SSL certificate. It's not a major issue. We can sort it out pretty quickly, but it's definitely worth knowing to make sure you're prepared and make sure you don't accidentally leave your website for a while without sorting the SSL out. So we're ready to change the DNS over, and that is going to be the next step here. So let's get this DNS updated. I've got my domain, Fictitious Consulting, is registered through Fasthosts, so I can change the DNS through that. I've got a feeling I'm going to be logged out. Yes. Okay, so I just need to log back in. Back into my account. And once I'm in here, I'm just going to go and update the DNS. Now, I'm just going to change the A records here. You can set your server to be your name server so that all your records are set by Plesk. It's useful if you're using things like if you want to set your email up and you want to have MX records and all of that sort of thing. It is probably easier to use your server for Plesk. I'm not going to cover that in this video. I'm just going to go through I'm going to use the Fasthosts name servers, and I'm going to change up. I'm going to update the DNS through us. So let's go ahead and go to domain names, and it is fictitiousconsulting.co.uk. So there we go. I'm just going to go to the DNS for that. So as we can see at the moment, my www and my blank are going towards the IP on the Fasthosts shared platform. So if I visit that website now, I'm going to be seeing it as it exists on Fasthosts. So we need to update those two. So we need to get our server IP address, which again, we're using this one. And I'm assuming here that you won't have updated any of your own IP addresses or anything like that. If you've changed the IP address that this website uses, then you'll need to use whatever IP address you're assigned to this particular website. But by default, it's going to be your server IP address. Now, as I update these, I may as well explain that I'm going to need to pause the video here just because this is going to take a little bit of time to propagate. Usually it's really quick. Now we're talking maybe I wouldn't leave it more than 10-15 minutes without checking. It can take longer, but again, because of that issue with the SSL and the site showing is insecure, whilst we're not going to have downtime, we are going to have a period where, well, in theory, we're not going to have downtime as long as we've done everything correctly. You want to be checking. But yeah, there's going to be that period. So you definitely want to keep a close eye on this. We're going to go ahead and pause the video just for 10 minutes or so, just while that all propagates over. And then we'll come back to it and have a look. Okay, so we're back and propagation has gone through. We just double checked. Now I am using another browser here. I'm using Firefox just to go through, and that's because I've been using Google Chrome up to now, and I just want to make sure there's no kind of local caching going on with the website content. So let's go ahead and browse to my domain name. Now, as we would have expected, we're getting this potential security risk because we're going to HTTPS here, and I haven't set up any kind of any SSL certificates. So we're expecting this. That's okay. So just going to accept the risk and continue. And I'm guessing, yeah, well, we're getting the Plesk default page here. Again, expected, not a problem. That is because, as I talked about earlier, I had this index.html page left here. And it's good because I know that when I go to fictitiousconsulting.co.uk now, I am going to my server because this default Plesk page is loading. So if we just go ahead and rename that just to, I don't know, Plesk index.html, or just delete it, up to you. It's quite useful for troubleshooting, I find, just so you can test DNS. So if we go ahead and change that, now we've got the index.php is what we'd be expecting. Now, this is the moment of truth. I haven't actually checked this yet. So if I control F5 to refresh, that's a little sigh of relief there. As we can see, my WordPress site has actually loaded and it's all working as expected. Now, I would just say what we do need to do is just go through and check everything's working as expected. Now, because of the certificate error, you might, if you're using WordPress, you might just need to go into your WordPress settings and change the URL to HTTP if you're just getting loads of errors with anything like that. But go through, browse your site, check it's working. If anything's not working, you can always change your DNS back to the shared platform, and then you know your website is going to be working at least while you try and work out whatever the error was. Going to have a bit of a browse to try and work it out and find out what any issues are. But yeah, like I say, to make sure your visitors aren't seeing any errors, you can always just change the DNS back to the shared platform. So let's go back to our server and have a look at this SSL certificate. Now, I'm going to add a free certificate here. I might have been logged out here. No, actually didn't take too long, the propagation, about 10 minutes. So at the moment, we haven't got any certificates, any SSL or anything like that. Now, you can get certificates. You can get premium ones that offer different options and everything. I'm going to go ahead and do what quite a vast majority of our customers do, which is install a free basic certificate provided by Let's Encrypt. So this is quite useful on Plesk. Plesk does pretty much all of this for you. It does it all automatically, and it will auto-renew these certificates for you, because one of the things with Let's Encrypt, you have to renew them quite a lot. Plesk can do all of that for you. It's nice and easy. So if we just want to secure the root domain name, we could. I would personally recommend securing the wildcard domain. So what that does is it includes all the subdomains. So I could have anything.fictitious.consulting.co.uk, and that certificate would cover that. You might need it in the future. You may as well set it up now. So if we click that and get it free, what we're going to need to do is do a bit more work on DNS, but that is okay. So it's just going through the motions now. Now, if we tried to do this before we changed the DNS, we'd have got an error saying that the domain name is pointed at a different IP address to the domain I was trying to apply for an SSL, which is why I couldn't do it until this point. Okay, so this is just going here. So now what we've got to do is a little bit more DNS work. So to verify this domain, what we have to do is add this TXT record to our DNS records. So we're going to just go ahead and copy that. So copy that. We're going to go back to the Fasthosts control panel. When we're on the DNS page, and I'm just going to refresh to make sure I'm still logged in and that session hasn't timed out. Okay, we're good. So this is for Fictitious Consulting, and I'm going to add a TXT record. Now the value is that value I just added in there. The host name, we need to add this here, Acme Challenge, and I've just copied a space. So only the Acme Challenge bit, nothing before that. So that's the host name. Going to save that. And unfortunately, we got a little bit of DNS propagation. Now, we're not talking much here. Usually, again, if you're with Fasthosts, about 10 minutes or so. But we are just going to go and check. It's sometimes even quicker. So now what I'm going to quickly do, while I'm just leaving that propagation, I'm going to show you how to check. Because what we need to do is make sure that's live. And then we're going to click this reload button. So if we just check that's gone right, yeah, so host name is right. And the value is right as well. I think it looks right. So let's go ahead and go to a website called MX Toolbox just to do a DNS lookup. Now, you don't have to use MX Toolbox. I just use it a lot, so I'm kind of comfortable using it. So what we can do here is we just go and do, let's go into the super tool. So what we can do is drop down this here, and we want to do a lookup on TXT. Okay, so we are going to do once it's live on here, we'll be able to refresh. So let's just go in and copy all of that. Go back to MX Toolbox. Now, I'm not expecting this has already gone through, but you never know. So I'm just going to go ahead and check and see. And it already has. That was very quick, which is always helpful for these videos. Okay, so we can see that TXT record is live on the internet. Now, the reason it's MX Toolbox is because it's an external lookup. So this is an external lookup, and we can already see that record. So we can go ahead and reload this page now that it's live. And fingers crossed. All right, we're good. SSL, it looks like it's working. So in theory, if we go back to Firefox now, and we go to tishesconsulting.co.uk, might need to control F5. Yeah, you can see that it's verified by Let's Encrypt. That's it. And so my website is now live on my server, and everything is good. Now, if you have been sat through all of this, thank you very much for bearing with me. There is a lot more we can do with Plesk. You can set up your email, do a lot of things. It's a very powerful tool. I would recommend just spending a bit of time getting to grips with it, because there's some good enhancements you can use that will sort of make your life a lot easier. Once we've got to this stage, we can think about cancelling our services with the Fasthosts shared hosting package that we've got. So, okay, it's worth closing that. Generally speaking, I would recommend just running it just for a couple of days, just to make sure that you're happy that everything is working on your server. Because if you run into any issues, you've still got that backup where you can just change your DNS back to the shared platform, and your old site will just show while you try and work out what's going on. But that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye for now.